Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of T-Dog RC. It's June 2020 in the UK. We're still in partial lockdown, but things are getting a little bit better. And literally just this evening, I managed to get hold of some hair clippers, and my wife had a go at giving me a bit of a trim. I think that looks certainly a lot better than it did. So thanks very much to her. But anyway, no one really cares about that. What we're interested in today is what we're going to be having a look at. So what we're going to be having a look at today is this, which is the ZOHD or ZOHD or ZOHD, however you want to say it. I think it's ZOHD Kopilot Lite, which is a little flight controller system, very basic compared to some of the others like the Maytech systems and things like that. This is just mainly for fixed wing, and it's very simple to use and set up. And we're going to be having a look how I've got it installed on this. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so yeah, this is the ZOHD Kopilot Lite. This is very good for fixed wing, and if you can't be bothered basically with all the setup of a full flight control system and connecting it to a computer and using iNav and that sort of thing, then this is ideal basically, because you don't have to do any of that. So this is a brand new one here, all sealed up. I've got a couple of these. So I'm gonna have a look at this one. We're going to unbox it, but before we get into the unboxing, I'm just going to show you how I've got it set up on my plane. And one of the cool things about this, it's got two things that I think are really helpful with fixed wing pilots. Number one is it has return to home. So if you get into trouble, you've either got maybe a big model that flies very fast or a small model that can quickly get out of sight. You can flick a button on your transmitter and it will basically just use the GPS module that's included in this and just come back home and start circling above you without you having to do anything. That also kicks in if you've got the failsafe set up on your radio. That also kicks in if it loses signal as well. So that's quite a nice feature. If you lose signal for some reason, you know that your plane's going to come back to you. The other thing it's got, which is one of my favourite things, is it's got a hand launch feature. Because we all know, well, you don't all know, but I told you in one of my videos that I'm not very good at hand launching. I don't mind admitting that. I've probably had several goes at hand launching. I've got a couple into the air. The rest have just been a nightmare. It's either just hit the ground or worse, it's hit the ground and smashed to bits. So yeah, I've not got a great history of that. Tried all sorts of different things. One of the videos I've done on this Radjet is I was saying that I've fitted a little hook to this so I can use a bungee and take that down the field and try it with a bungee, which I did a couple of weeks ago, and it still wasn't very successful. As you can see, it didn't damage the model in any way, but I just couldn't get it off the ground. Basically, it just seemed it wanted to kind of go along almost like that, and only for a few feet, and then it just dived straight into the ground basically. So whether I was not pulling back hard enough on the bungee or what, I don't know, but I just got a bit of a bad feeling. It's one of those things where you think I better stop now before I do smash it to bits. So I then decided to try on another model the Kopilot system, which I'd had for a while but never got around to setting it up because I know that it's got a hand launch feature. And actually, the way the hand launch feature works on the Kopilot is you put it into hand launch mode, you put the throttle on, but nothing happens, so it doesn't actually throttle it up. You then throw the model, and when it gets to a certain speed, it automatically puts the throttle into whatever you set it at when you flick the switch, and it takes off, and it basically puts it straight into return to home mode. So it takes off, flies it round in a circle until you take over. But that's fine for sort of fairly, you know, lightweight models that you can throw them and they'll glide. But something like an EDF isn't necessarily going to do that. So what I tried down at the field was to open the throttle first, then put it into return to home mode, and then basically just throw it. And to my amazement, it was one of those moments where I just thought, this is either going to smash the model to bits or it's going to work. And it literally just went off out my hand and just flew up in a circle, started going around my head. It was brilliant. It was a really good good moment when I saw that happen. So I decided, rather than carry on with the bungee system, I will fit it to this Radjet. So just give you a quick overview. Let's get the canopy off here. So inside here, you might be able to see that we've basically got the flight controller is there in the nose. Hopefully you can see that okay there. And plugged into that are all the servos and the speed controller. So the throttle does go into this one as well. And then I've got mine set up to use S-Bus. And the cool thing about that is, if you can see, maybe just, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, whether it's even going to focus, but that there is a FreeSky RXSR, I think it is, receiver. So it's one of the tiny little receivers that supports S-Bus. And because the flight controller has a throttle output on it, it means that I can use one of these little receivers and get aileron, rudder, elevator and throttle. So even if I didn't use it as a flight controller, I could still use one of those little receivers just to you know, it's almost like a PWM converter, and it enables me to run a standard setup but use one of those little receivers. So it's a really nice combination, because obviously the flight controller is a certain size. It's probably not quite as big as a normal receiver, but what it does mean is that I don't have to have another second device, as in a big receiver. I can just use one of these tiny little micro receivers, and it just connects with S-Bus. So there's no other cables, it's just one cable. And that works really well. And then connected to this, there is GPS receiver, which I've just hot glued onto the outside here. On another model, I have actually got it in the inside of the canopy, which does also work. But you just want it somewhere, obviously, where it's going to pick up the GPS, and that's what it uses to give you the return to home mode. So yeah, that's how I've got it set up in this model. No more difficult than that. And then we'll take a look now on the bench at the box and some of the components in a bit more detail. And also, you will notice now I've got a bench up in the loft, which is great, so I can do more of these sorts of setup videos and things like that. So I've had a good clear out of my loft, which I said I would do, and yeah, we've got a nice little bench set up here, so that's all good. Right then, let's have a look what we get in the box. So first thing to say is that it does come in this really nice little box. And this is going to be really handy even after you've finished with the box, basically, because you could use this to store some little components in and bits and bobs like that. So in the centre there is the actual flight controller. We've then got the GPS unit there, and that is a little control unit. And then this is in 2 layers. So if we take that top layer out, underneath we've got a little sticky pad to stick it down, but as you'll see, you can see actually from this sticky pad that there are a couple of holes there as well, so you could potentially screw it down if you wanted to. So that's handy. And then here's a bunch of cables that you get with it. There's one to connect the controller board, and there's one to connect the GPS. And then there's also a PWM, a set of PWM standard cables. So if you don't want to use S-Bus, there is a way that you can connect this to any receiver using these PWM cables, and they plug into this slot. Sorry, they plug into this slot here on the flight controller, which is the PWM slot. But if you're not using PWM and you're using S-Bus, then you can see there that you just plug into that end one there, which is the S-Bus port. So it's a lot neater if you have got an S-Bus receiver. But yeah, nevertheless, they include that, so you can use any receiver basically. And then you get a little screwdriver, which is to adjust the control board with, the sticker. And then you get the instructions. Now, these instructions are okay, but they're a bit weird because they've sort of laid them out. So it's a bit all over the place. So you sort of have to look at some of the warnings here, look at some of the warnings there, and then check this box up here, that box there, and then there's a few more bits. So there's a little box down there with a few more tips in. So it's not the best laid out manual I've ever seen. It's a little bit all over the place, and it's quite easy to miss one of these things, which could be crucial for setting the system up. But I'm going to go through, brief setup anyway, so hopefully this video will help you with that. And also, for some reason, they've decided to use this sort of brown on black colour for some of the most important bits, and it's not always the easiest to read. But anyway, it does make sense if you've got the time to study it. So what I'm going to do is okay, so let's just have a look at these components. Just pop these out. So these are the main components. So this is the little flight controller board, and as you can see, it's pretty small. It's no bigger than a receiver, and obviously it's square and quite flat, which is good. The GPS unit is very small, standard sort of GPS unit. As I say, this wants to sit on the outside of the model, ideally somewhere. And then you've got this little controller board which connects to this settings port here with one of the cables that you get in the box. And then you use the screwdriver to adjust the controller board like this. You can adjust the gain on the elevator and the ailerons. There's no option to adjust the gain on the rudder, interestingly, but just the elevator and ailerons. But the thing about this is you don't have to have this plugged in all the time. So once you've got your settings done, you can unplug this basically and save a little bit of space inside the model. Right then, so this is how it looks. This is just another one that I've had in another model that's still got cabled up. So I thought I'd use this one to show you. So we've got here one of my little FreeSky S-Bus receivers. By the way, a quick tip on these receivers: if you buy one of these and get it out of the box and use the included lead like this one, which is in the box, to use S-Bus, which you would think this was the one you want with the servo plug on the end, you will find that it doesn't actually work. And the reason for that is that it's actually cabled up differently. It's actually for S-Port the way it's set up. So this receiver, this lead, sorry, is actually for flashing it. That's the intention. So it's got an S-Port connection, so you can actually write to the receiver. So it doesn't work as S-Bus. All you need to do is move the pin along. So it's in that. There's the little screwdriver. Sorry, I'm digressing slightly here, but probably a lot of you who will be using this might be using one of these sorts of receivers. So initially it's in that port there, and you just move it along one to that port there, and then that's the S-Bus output, and you'll then find it suddenly starts working. So that's the receiver, and that goes into, in my case, into the S-Bus port. I'm not using the PWM. And then the servos just connect in here. I mean, this is pretty obvious stuff. So I've just got some extension leads here. These aren't actually going to servos, but basically you just plug these in This is a Y lead actually, which is why it's on the aileron. But you've got aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder, and you also have an auxiliary as well, which is quite handy. If you've got landing gear or something like that, you could connect it to there. That's only if that auxiliary is only sort of useful if you're using a receiver like this, where you don't have any PWM ports. You have got an extra PWM port from here. Of course, if you're using a normal receiver, then you might have a spare port on that anyway, which you could use for flaps or gear or whatever. And then the GPS unit just plugs in here, and then, as we said, stick that somewhere outside the model. And then this is the little controller unit that you use to set it up. One important note is that this arrow on here denotes which way it has to go in the model. So it has to be flat in the model like that, with the arrow facing towards the nose. I don't think there's an option to mount it on its side or mount it that way. As far as I'm aware, I think you have to mount it this way, facing the model. But as it's quite small and flat, that's not usually a problem, to be honest. So when you first sort of get it out of the box, the main things you want to do, you want to get it all connected, make sure your servos are working okay, and you've got your S-bus connection or whatever, PWM connection, and everything seems to be working okay. Don't worry about the directions for now. Also, don't set any mixers on your radio, because it's all the mixing is done by this. And to change the mixing, you use the set button, which it does mention in the instructions. And there's a series of LEDs that appear on here. So you hold this set button down, depending on whether it's V-tail, T-tail, or a flying wing, etc. And you just press this set button until you get the desired LED lights, and then you hold it to confirm, and then it's set to that particular wing type. But by default, it's set to flying wing, which is probably going to be the most common. So you don't have to do anything for that. And then once you've done that, you then need to decide whether you're going to use return to home or fence mode. And again, by default, it's set to return to home, because I guess that's the way most people will have it set up. So in order to just check that, you need to make sure that this little dial is set all the way over to the right. So turn it clockwise and make sure it won't go anymore, and that's in return to home mode, which is how it comes out the box. If it's in anything other than that mode, or certainly past 3 o'clock if you like, anything back from 3 o'clock round to fully anti-clockwise is in fence mode. And when you turn it clockwise to around about, say, 3 o'clock, that gives you the distance of the fence, which is why it's set like that. But then anything, as I say, all the way over to clockwise, as far as it will go, that puts it in return to home mode. So that's why they've done it like that. Okay, so I've got a battery, just a standard. It's not a LiPo, this is just a standard receiver battery, just to power it up, just to show you in a bit more detail. But once you've set your return to home mode or fence mode, as I say, most people have it in return to home, you then want to assign on your transmitter a 3-channel switch to, a 3-position switch. Thanks for that. A 3-position switch to channel 5, and that by default is the mode switch. And as you flick that, you'll see now. I flick that to the middle. I know you can't see the transmitter, but I'll flick that to the middle, and that is now flashing red, which means it's off. If I push it back, it flashes green, which means it's in stabilization mode. So that's just like flying with a gyro, although it's probably it's not like a normal gyro, where it will just sort of help you sort of smooth the model out in windy conditions and things like that. This is a bit more, I suppose the word might be aggressive. It's like a self-leveling mode, which is not to everyone's taste, and I probably personally wouldn't use that much. I'm mainly using this device for the return to home and the launch mode, because it will constantly want to, if you let go of the sticks, it wants to put the model right again. But anyway, that's the mode you've got there. and then when I flick it into return to home mode, it's probably going to start beeping because the GPS receiver hasn't picked up a signal because I'm inside. But when you're outside, that will pick up a signal, and you get another red light appear on there. So if we just flick it to return to home mode, it may start beeping, but it's not at the moment, so that's fine. It might be because I've not got it connected to an ESC as well. Yeah, so when it doesn't have a GPS signal and I flick it to return to home mode, because there is no GPS signal, it just puts it into stabilization mode again, which is why that's flashing. But yeah, in order to get that, as I say, you just need a 3-position switch assigned to channel 5 on your transmitter. So that's that. All the mixing, as we've said, is done by this, so don't have any mixers on your radio. Once you've set channel 5 up, what you want to do then is put it into stabilization mode, and you want to check the movement of your servos. If anything is backwards, so you need to reverse the setup, then that is done in the radio. Okay, so just to explain, once you've got this set up on your 3-position switch, you want to put it in stabilization mode, and then what you need to do is check which way your surfaces are moving when you move the model, which is very important when you're setting up any gyro. You want to make sure that the surfaces are moving in the correct way, and the rule of thumb is whichever surface goes up, whichever way the aircraft moves. So if you move the wing up, the right wing up, for example, then the right aileron should go up. If you move the tail up, then the elevator should go up by the gyro. So the surface always goes in the direction that you're moving, if that makes sense. And if you find that when you do that, it's reversed, so let's say when you pitch the model down, so the elevator's up, the tail's up in the air, sorry, so the elevator surface should go up from the gyro. If you find actually the elevator's going down, that means it's in the wrong direction. And the way you change it on this is actually quite simple, because on a lot of gyros you have to go in and go into the controller side of the gyro and change that. But with this, you just use these little pots here. So at 12 o'clock, that's neutral if you like. And if you find you've got it set just over to the right hand side here, if you find that the elevator's going down when you move the tail up, then you want to actually just reverse this by turning it. So 12 o'clock's neutral, so you want to actually turn it that way. So anything from 12 o'clock sort of down anti-clockwise is in one direction, and then once you hit 12 o'clock and then you go anti-clockwise, that's the opposite direction. So that's how you set the direction that you want your surfaces to move in. And the reason why this isn't just a switch, so if I want it to move in the other direction, I'll just switch this rather than actually turning it, is because this is also the gain. So if, for example, we decide that our elevator, the right direction for it is from 12 o'clock clockwise, this then also becomes our gain if that's the right direction. And the more we have it turned clockwise, the more gain we've got, and the closer we have it to 12 o'clock, the less gain we've got. So that's how you set the gain up. So it's quite a neat system really, and once you've got your head around it, it's fairly easy to set up. Okay, just to give you a quick example of the servo direction and the gain, I've just got this plugged back in and connected a servo to the elevator section. So this is an elevator servo. So if I move, I've got it in stabilization mode. If I pitch the controller up and down, there is some movement, as you can see there, but not a lot. And if I then adjust this, so if I turn this to the right, all the way over to the right, so this is full gain, it becomes very sensitive. You can see if I pitch this back, the servo's moving to the right. So that's clearly adjusted the gain because it's become mega sensitive. And if I pitch this back like that, as if the model was going nose up, then the servo moves to the right. If that was pushing my elevator in the wrong direction, I'd need to adjust this. So what I do is adjust this, and if we put it all the way over to the left for demonstration purposes, and I now pitch up, you can see that the servo is now moving to the left. And obviously there's a hell of a lot of gain there because the servo is moving around like crazy. But if I just turn this down a little bit but still keep it to the left of 12 o'clock, the gain is much lower, but as you can see the servo is still going to the left. As soon as I adjust this past 12 o'clock, just to give you another example, the servo is now moving to the right, but the gain is low. So it's as simple as that to get the servo direction set up in terms of the stabilization correction and also return to home. Obviously the plane needs to know whether it's adjusting the elevator up or down or right to left. So it's important, if you're not going to use stabilization, you still need to have this set up correctly for the return to home mode. So once you've got all that set up, you then have to do a radio calibration, and to do that you basically put it again in the stabilization mode and make sure that all the controls are at neutral and the throttle's at its lowest position, and then you just hold down this set button for 3 seconds. The LEDs will flash, and that means it's calibrated the radio. You then have to do something called Kopilot neutral calibration, and this one can catch some people out. So all you do for this, sorry about this, is basically you just put it into stabilization mode again, and then you pull the sticks down like this and hold it for so many seconds. Sorry, it's because I've got my radio close to the receiver, it doesn't like that. You hold it for, I think it's 5 seconds. Let me just double check that. Yep, you hold it for 5 seconds and then that will calibrate the radio. And what will happen is these LEDs will flash twice and you'll see that that means it's basically calibrated the neutral position. You only have to do that once, then you fly it. If you need to trim it out, then you need to do that again, just to teach it the neutral positions again. But the bit that can catch people out is that if you've only got a wing, for example, which has only got ailerons and elevator, you may not have enabled the rudder channel on your radio. And in order to put it into that mode, it has to use the rudder channel because it has to detect you've got all the sticks pointing downwards and inwards. And that caught me out because I couldn't get it to go into this neutral calibration mode, and it was because I hadn't got the rudder enabled. As soon as I enabled the rudder, then it started to work. So that's just something to bear in mind. And then that's it. Once you've done that, it's all set up and ready to go. You can go and fly. Once you've flown it and you've got it trimmed out, obviously trim it out in normal mode with no stabilization or no return to home. Get it all trimmed out. Once you're happy that it's trimmed out, land it, and then just do that neutral calibration again where you move the sticks inwards and let it sort itself out. And then that's it really. And obviously you might find that you need to play with the gain as well when you're out at the field and you've flown it a couple of times. If the plane tends to waggle a lot and move around, then it means you've got too much gain. So you're going to turn that back towards 12 o'clock depending on which side you're using. And what my recommendation is, as I say, you don't need this little controller board plugged in all the time if you've not got much room in the plane. So you can unplug it. You could leave the cable in and just unplug this bit, but make sure you take this with you down to the field because the last thing you want is to get all the way down there and then realise you need to adjust the gain a little bit, and obviously you haven't got this with you, which would be a little bit frustrating. So that's it. It's fairly straightforward. So just to recap, we get it out of the box, obviously connect everything together, the GPS, connect your servos, connect use the PWM cable to connect a standard receiver, use the S-Bus if you're lucky enough to have an S-Bus receiver, check that all the surfaces are moving. Use the set button to set your wing type. By default it's in wing mode, that's fine. And also then you need to choose whether you're going to use fence mode or return to home. By default it's set to return to home, which is all the way over to clockwise. If you want to use fence, you just turn it this way and then select the distance of your fence by adjusting the gain on that. All fence mode does is it means that the model will only travel so far and it will basically hit a virtual fence and then turn around and come back. But most people will have it on return to home. Once you've got that set, then as I've said, check the movement of your gyro correction using the details I've mentioned previously, and set the direction and the gain using these two pots. Once you've done that, do the radio calibration, so hold the set button down for 3 seconds and it will calibrate the radio. You only have to do that once, and then once you've done that, you need to do all the way down, all the way in, hold it for 5 seconds. This will flash to show you that it's gone into that mode. Wait till it stops flashing, then take it out and fly it, trim it without any stabilization, bring it back down, do that neutral calibration again, and then hopefully you should be good to go after that. And look at that. It's actually, even though I'm inside, I am in my loft, and it's picked up a GPS signal because we've got a little red flashing light now. So there you go, it proves that it works. So I hope you found that useful. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to get out and fly this, hopefully tomorrow, all being well. It's going to be a nice day here in the UK. Yeah, we're going to be giving this a go. I'll hopefully be filming that as well. Using the hand launch system, which hopefully this time will get this thing into the air. If it doesn't work after that, then I'm going to give this up as a bad job and just admit defeat with the ducted fan modification. But hopefully that will get this into the air and we'll be able to fly it around and have some fun with it. So right, hang on then. I hate this. I really do hate this. Full blast. Yeah, we'll be trying that tomorrow, and I'll be filming that, and then you can see the Kopilot Lite in action. But certainly, if you're thinking of getting one of these, I would recommend it. The launch mode is brilliant. Kind of takes all that stress away from doing a hand launch, and you're almost guaranteed to have a successful launch every time. And it is really easy to set up compared to a more complex flight controller. You don't need to connect it to a computer or anything like that. Everything you need is on this little box. So yeah, I would recommend giving one a go. I think they're about £35 from Banggood, so not too expensive considering what you get. I think it's pretty good, and of course it will act as a failsafe as well. So even if you know, it doesn't have to be a little model, it could be a big model that you've invested a fair bit of money in, that's not hand launch, but you can obviously always use that return to home feature to give yourself a little bit of a safety net. So I hope that's been useful. If you could please like and subscribe. I'm trying to build my channel up. Thanks to all those people that have subscribed so far. I do appreciate it, and hopefully I'll get some more over the coming months. And if you have got any questions about this, then stick them in the comments, and I'll try and answer them for you. Okay, thanks very much.